these got accused of feeling cheap and nasty. I know what people are talking about.
Now, traditionally, it has a terrible reputation for reliability.
Now, I've been lucky enough to drive pretty much every iteration of Commodore. This is by a very long way. You want to know what goes wrong with these? Do you want to know if they're as bad as some people would lead you to believe? Do you want to see how they're aging and what they're like to live with? Most importantly, do you want to know if you should buy one or not? We're going to answer all of those questions and so many more, but first of all, what even is this? Now, if you're watching this from Australia, you already know that the ZB Commodore is one of the most controversial cars to ever step foot on our shores. But if you're watching this from the UK or Europe or the US, you might be thinking, hang on a sec, how can a Vauxhall or an Opel Insignia or a Buick Regal possibly be controversial? Anyway, the German-made Commodore Insignia Regal has been available in two body styles, a 5-door liftback like this or a 5-door wagon. It landed on our shores in 2018 and it wrapped up with the demise of Holden just 2 years later. It's powered by a 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine or a 4 or 6-cylinder petrol engines, with the 4 pots driving just the front wheels and the 6 sending power to all 4. And fun fact about the engines, that 4-cylinder turbo in the ZB Commodore, it has a superior power to weight ratio than the previous generation SV6 Commodore, and the 6 in this leaves it for dead. Now, as far as trim specs go, the normal Commodore is available in 4 flavours and the slightly schmancier Calais in just 2. But where the ZB is really appealing is in just how much car you get for the money. See, thanks to Holden not really existing anymore, prices have plummeted on these. At the very low end of the spectrum, base models kick off from around about $14,000. Even the most expensive ones, they're asking under $40,000. Now, think about that for a second. You can get a 5-door German-made 235 kilowatt all-wheel drive car packed with features for under $40,000. Many of them are asking under $30,000. An equivalent Audi A7, which is going to have less power and potentially less features, is going to be asking around about $70,000. So therefore, the ZB might be a fantastic way to save some money. You know what's another great way of saving some money? Getting your car finance sorted via Driver. Now look, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details. You can check it all out via the link down there. But personally, I've never come across a simpler way to sort your car finance out. Plus, if you do all of that via that link, we're going to give you a free $150 fuel voucher. Okay, now the first of the controversial points, or I should say polarizing points, the looks. Now, to many of the Commodore faithful, they despise the way this looks because it looks European. It looks kind of classy and sophisticated. But in saying that, plenty of the people that have bought these, like Shane that owns this particular car, one of the reasons they bought it was because it looks nothing like a traditional Commodore. To many, the previous generation Commodores have been ruined by association. They're good cars, but they've just been ruined by people driving like complete dickheads. And for me personally, yeah, I tend to agree. This does everything you'd want from a car like this. Angular headlights, you've got some really cool kind of crease line details here. It's a really good size. I really dig it. Plus, if just like Shane Van Gisbergen, you own a ZB wagon and you choose to lower it and put on some really classy wheels, it can look as good as this. And come on, ZB haters, you've got to admit that is a hot looking car, although there might be a few issues with the exterior, but we'll cover those in a sec. But besides the looks, as far as exterior features go, they are superb for what this car is asking. Even base models will get 17-inch alloy wheels, dusk sensing headlights with DRLs, rain sensing wipers, front and rear parking sensors, a rear view camera, and even semi-autonomous parking. But spec up to a VXR like this, and the alloys grow to 20 inches. You get a 360-degree surround camera, the VXR body kit, and an intelligent LED headlight system, powered tailgate, and so much more. But it's inside where the features really, really impress. Actually, I feel like Holden went, you know what? We know everyone's going to hate the fact that we're calling this a Commodore. How about we put every conceivable feature in this thing to hopefully distract them? For example, even the base models get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, a 7-speaker stereo that sounds bloody good, dual zone climate control, and all of this and more. Then the RS, it improves the material qualities and you get some ambient lighting. The RSV, that gives you leather, a much upgraded sound system, and even active noise cancellation technology, plus all of this and more. Then a VXR like this, seriously, wow. And remember, we are talking about a car that's less than $40,000 here. You get an incredible sounding Bose sound system, performance front seats that are not only heated and cooled, they have massage functions. Plus the rear seats are heated, plus stopping power is provided by Brembo brakes. And then the Calais models, they add even more stuff. But if you do need all the specific details about what every trim spec gets, head to ReDriven.com and check out that free cheat sheet. Have a read as well, because it's amazing what each of these get. Although it is great that that these have a lot of features, just that you might also be getting a few gremlins as well. We'll explain soon. Okay, now, how is this interior aging? You know what? It's not. This feels like a brand new car from a design aspect anyway. It's such a lovely place to be. These got accused of feeling cheap and nasty. I know what people are talking about. Yeah, there are some hard scratchy plastics here and there, but overall, granted, this is a top spec VXR, it feels premium. It feels so much more expensive than what it is. Even the ergonomics, all completely spot on. Driving position, and there's loads of adjustability as well, but driving position is great. The seats are fantastic. Perfect balance between being comfortable and supportive. The massage function's lovely as well. It's such a great interior. Although in saying that, I did live with an RS as a long-term press car when they first came out, and I don't remember it feeling as flash as this. I remember feeling like it was a little bit on the cheap side. These additions, beautiful. Now, as far as wear and tear goes, in this particular car, this has got over 60,000 Ks on it. It is this owner's everyday driver. Wear and tear in here, what wear and tear. It feels like a new car. Door cards are great. All the high traffic areas, steering wheel still has texture to it. The leather on the seats still totally supple, not shiny or hard at all. Even, this normally shits me to tears. Gloss black plastic everywhere is normally a nightmare, especially in high traffic areas. It just scratches up. In this car, like, okay, there's some tiny scratches, but you can barely see them. That's great. Owners, let me know, is that a normal thing? Does this scratch up in your car, or do they all look as good as this? Even the way everything works and feels, like, it's great. Buttons feel good. Everything feels good. Great wear and tear. Then as far as practicality in the VXR, here we go. You've got a little cubby bin here, but also as a spot, perfectly designed, little squishy pocket for your phone, so that goes neatly in there. Little flip up cubby hole here. 2 cup holders with a spot for, I don't know, your pen collection just there. Obviously has a glove box, but the size of it is a complete joke. Excellent sized door bins, another little storage kind of pocket here, nothing under here. Nowhere for sunglasses, that's annoying. That's about it up front for practicality. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 15 centimeters taller than another high-performing famous ZB, McLaren CEO Zach Brown. This is in my driving position. Excellent back here, loads of knee room, good amount of foot room. Even the transmission tunnel isn't too huge, so if you are sitting in the back, it's in the middle in the back, it's not a nightmare. Seats, super comfortable. If I was getting really picky, you do sit a bit too like upright. I wish it was a little bit more reclined, but it's just a really nice place to be. Also, with it being so dark in here, I thought it would feel quite claustrophobic, but it's not too bad. Wear and tear back here, yeah, none. I don't think the back seats have ever been sat in. Feels like a brand new car. And practicality, air vents in the back, 2 USB ports. You've got your own heat seaters back here. Pull down armrest with a couple of cup holders. And that's about it. I think you can pull the seat down as well. Yeah, you can pull that down as well. But that's about it. Nothing under the seats there. That's it. And then in the boot, okay. Not only is it massive back here because of the whole lift back thing, but because the aperture is so huge, it's so easy to get stuff in and out. Plus, the seats fold almost completely flat. Yeah, the wagon is more practical, but it's only more practical in the sense you get a bit more space here and there's no load lip to slide stuff in or slide stuff over. Pick stuff over to get in. You know what I mean? It's bloody practical. Also, I don't know if they all come with this, but this is ingenious. This is a little protector for the rear boot and stuff. Excellent. Something I've just realized, you can fold the seats down via this little button. How good's that? Okay, so what's it like to drive? Are you ready for some controversial opinions? Here we go. Now, I've been lucky enough to drive pretty much every iteration of Commodore, and excluding the V8 models, this is, by a very long way, the best Commodore to drive ever. And that includes the 4-cylinder models, which to many of the Commodore faithful was absolute heresy. In fact, if you take the brute force and performance driving aspects out of the V8s, this is a nicer car to drive than even them. I mean, even after a few years and over 60,000 Ks, this thing feels more refined than any previous Commodore. And it's really important to know that Holden re-engineered the steering, the handling, even the NVH levels for Australian roads. And you can tell. Even in the firmer Sport and VXR modes, there are no rattles, no weird noises. It sounds and feels totally premium. Now, as I mentioned, I lived with the 2-litre turbo RS for quite some time, and between you and I, like many Australians, I wanted to hate that car so much. But I couldn't. because it just did being a car so incredibly well. And the VXR, it takes everything that made that car so wonderful to drive and just turns up the spice a bit. This engine, it hauls so nicely, and the Brembos, there's feel and just so much confidence in the stopping power. You know what? I actually feel like a few years and thousands of kilometers have really sorted this thing out. It just feels so settled and confident all the time. Also, it feels smaller than it is. It feels like a little hatchback. In fact, from a driving perspective, it does feel tens of thousands of dollars more than it actually is. You know what, the only real negative I can find is that the indicator stalk just feels a bit cheap and nasty. That's about it. But look, you might still be of the opinion that this isn't a real Commodore. And yeah, you know what? You're right, because in terms of driving, this is better. And now that many of you want to hurt me for even saying that or suggesting it, it does seem only appropriate that we now talk about the copious amount of safety features. But to take you through the safety features, backed by popular demand from our AU Falcon review, it's my most Aussie mate, Dave.
Righto, the ZB Commodore, which isn't a Commodore. Safety stuff first, you're going to get at least 6 airbags, ABS, electronic stability control, traction control, plus a Holden Eye. What a stupid name that is, but anyway. It's a forward-facing camera that gives you forward collision alerts with pedestrian detection, autonomous emergency braking, lane departure warning, lane keep assist, and a following distance indicator. Plus the higher spec models get side blind zone alert and rear cross traffic alert, while the VXR and Calais get adaptive cruise control. The only safety feature it doesn't have is protection from real Commodore drivers calling you
Now, before we get into what goes wrong with these, as Dave so eloquently alluded to, one of the big controversies surrounding the ZB is the fact that it's called a Commodore at all. Holden, or more accurately General Motors, when responding to declining family car sales, opted not to invest millions in a new Aussie-developed and built family car, instead choosing to rebadge the German-made insignia as the new Commodore, thus causing the Mark's faithful to have an absolute tantrum. However, the Commodore faithful have been, let's say, conveniently ignoring some brutal and hard facts for quite some time now. From the first generation of VB from 1978 through to the end of the third generation with the VZ in 2007, Commodores have always been a mishmash of rebadged imports, co-developed platforms and borrowed parts. Generally, platforms have been combined from Opel and Vauxhall chassis elements, often powered by Nissan or Buick-derived engines. Even the VE to VF, though designed, engineered and manufactured in Australia, featured American-made LS V8 engines. And yet all of that has never stopped the fans from claiming that the Commodore is quintessentially Australian. And look, sure, yes, the ZB, it wasn't made here, but it's really important to remember that Holden engineers recalibrated everything from the steering and suspension to the sat-nav and the stitching to handle Australian conditions. But can it handle Australian conditions? Let's start with the exterior. First up, the paint. Apparently it can scratch really easily. Also, there are a few reports of the paint peeling and fading. It happens around the windscreen and also anywhere there's sort of water gutters or water channels. Now, this does seem to only really affect cars that are exposed to the sun on the regular. If they're garaged and cared for, not as many dramas. The concern is, to fix it with a full respray or a full wrap is going to cost you thousands. A handful of owners have also reported that the taillights can let water in, so therefore the seals can leak. Then there are the occasional reports of body kit parts coming loose or even rims cracking, but again, not common. Now, we get approached about partnership and advertising deals all of the time, but when we started ReDriven, we made a deal with ourselves that anything that we support and promote has to bring genuine value to you. So before we said yes to WiperTech, I ordered a set of WiperTech wiper blades under my partner's name to see if the wiper blades were the real deal. They arrived the day after I ordered them. They were an absolute breeze to fit, and they were so good, everybody involved with ReDriven now uses WiperTech wiper blades. But this is where the value for you comes in. If you order a set of WiperTech wiper blades via the link down there, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Thank you. Okay, common problems inside, and the big one is the failing air conditioning, but it's not actually as bad as you might think. See, according to the owners and even some of the Holden techs that we spoke to in researching this, apparently the air conditioning lines, they run too close to the engine and then they can rub and then eventually leak. Now, this generally occurs from around about the 80,000 kilometre mark, but more good news here. Generally, it's been fixed up under warranty, and sometimes it's even been fixed up before it happens during a service. So just make sure you check the service book to see if it's been done. If it hasn't been done, get it done. Then there are a few sporadic reports of weird electronic gremlins, like the start-stop system no longer working, or the infotainment system glitching out, or Bluetooth being hard to connect. We wouldn't call them common problems, but. Then there are the owners that have reported, rattles and squeaks and weird noises. Best case scenario, it might just be like a couple of plastic clips that have let go. Worst case scenario, it might be the audio control modules, like the control module for the Bose sound system, or just the infotainment system in general. Under the dash, they can come loose and rattle about a bit. It's a bit of a pain in the ass fix, but it's actually kind of a fun weekend job. And then there were a couple of owners that reported things like these little trapdoors not opening and closing properly, and some of the plastics actually lifting out of the center console. Again, not common at all. Actually, the vast majority of owners that we spoke to, including Shane that owns this particular car, have had a completely fault-free experience with the car, no problems. Actually, a massive thank you to Shane, all the ZB Commodore owners, and the Holden techs that helped us research this video. You guys are all legends. And if you'd love to get your hands on a completely fault-free and near mint condition VXR, this one's actually for sale. Hit the link down below to get in touch with Shane to buy it, because it's a bloody good example. Okay, now mechanically, what goes wrong with the ZB Commodore? I'm really sorry, I can't tell you, because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jim is.
The 4-cylinder 2-litre turbo in these is from the Ecotec family of engines. Now, it's available in a bunch of GM-related products from 1.4 to 2.5 litre capacities, normally aspirated and turbos. Now, traditionally, it has a terrible reputation for reliability. Now, these are an evolution of those engines, and they are much improved, although they do still have some issues with timing chains, and they have issues with oil consumptions and some turbo-related issues too. Although evidence suggests that poor servicing is a significant factor there. They do occasionally have some issues with their high-pressure fuel pumps and injectors, and they have some issues too with the throttle body and the accelerator pedal position sensor. Sometimes that can just be a software glitch, and other times they just fail. Yeah, but that is not a common issue though. The turbo diesel in these, it's an engine by Fiat, and it's in a bunch of Alphas, Chevs, Fiats and Jeeps, and it's the least popular engine in a fairly unpopular car, so that's a red flag right there. I'm not saying it's a bad engine, it's actually not too bad. It does have a few issues with injector seals and some oil leaks and the usual EGR and DPF complications, but definitely not considered to be unreliable. The diesel in these, unlike the petrol, has a timing belt which is due every 120,000 Ks. Now the 3.6 litre V6, it thankfully shares virtually nothing with its old predecessor. And thankfully the whole timing chain setup has been completely redesigned from its predecessor's complete timing chain cluster. They've been simplified from 3 chains to 2 chains. They are much more reliable, and they're actually easier and cheaper to fix in case there is a problem. The thermostat on these things is a very common problem, and typically that actually sticks open, which makes the engine run cool, and that starts logging all sorts of engine coolant temperature fault codes. So a very common problem, and it's not very easy to get at. You've got to take the manifold off to do it. They are direct injection, so choking up the inlet ports and valves is going to be an ongoing issue. All of them have issues with their air conditioners. Now, Adam did mention the compressor hard lines, but they actually have problems with their pumps too. They just catastrophically fail sometimes. A lot of those got done under warranty, but obviously ongoing support under warranty is not going to be there. So expect to have to put AC compressors on it every few years. Another common problem that was mostly dealt with under warranty and recalls was the ABS control module and the brake booster issue. That's just a problem where the pedal went rock hard and people thought they lost brakes. Again, that mostly was sorted out under warranty. And speaking of recalls, there's a bunch of them listed on the cheat sheets. Weird noises from the transmission does seem to be a bit of an ongoing issue. Now, some claim that just simply changing the oil fixes the weird noises. Typically, any transmission that's making any weird noise is a sign of things to come, and it's very likely it's going to fail at some point. A lot of them do fail, a lot of them have been replaced under warranty as well. And the diffs too, the rear diffs in the all-wheel drives, a bunch of them have been replaced under warranty as well. And remember, the warranty's not going to be around forever, and they will continue to fail. Another problem with the transmission is they have an issue with their transmission selector position sensor, fairly common problem too. Now, these things mechanically are a bit risky, but the features in these things, to sell them, they just put everything in them. They are really fully loaded with options, as are a lot more expensive cars. Now, the good thing with these is they're much cheaper, and when things start to go wrong, that risk is actually probably worth living with. However, when they do break, getting spare parts for these, now that's where the issues start. Now, as far as spare parts go for these things, Holden in Australia doesn't exist anymore. Look, in this industry, it's hard enough to get parts for cars that actually are available from brands that actually do still exist. And although the E2XX platform on which this is built is still available in other countries with other brands and other cars still support it, getting parts for these in Australia is going to be difficult. Here in Australia, obviously, no Holden means no ongoing factory support. And because it was a fairly low volume car in terms of sales, that means second-hand parts are going to be difficult to get too. Now, you'll always be able to get most of the parts you need from overseas, but just be prepared for the pain of locating the parts and the cost of shipping and paying for those parts with our piss-weak Australian dollar.
Okay, now before we tell you if we think you should buy a ZB or not, what are your alternatives? The Audi A7, BMW 435i, Volkswagen Passat R36 and Volvo T60 all fit the criteria. However, at ZB asking prices, all will be much older, showing more kilometres, will be less equipped, and not to mention, they all have their own reliability issues. Then, while the Skoda Superb and Volkswagen Passat 206 TSI are totally viable alternatives, the ZB offers such superior equipment and potentially far lower kilometres for a similar price. So despite any of the potential reliability concerns and maybe challenges in getting parts down the track, the ZB stands out as a completely unique and incredibly high value proposition. Look, obviously we're not talking Japanese build quality here, but as one owner mentioned to us, he simply couldn't find a lower kilometre, more recent, higher equipped car with less than 100,000 Ks on it for the money like a ZB Commodore. Although, there is another car that does tick all of the ZB Commodore boxes, and it might potentially be the VXR's most direct competitor. It's this. But a question for you, if you wouldn't buy that or this, what would you buy? Let us know in the comments below. See you next time. Now, think about that for a second. Okay.
It's an engine by Fiat, and it's a bunch of and some accelerated possessal.